morning, people. Welcome back to F Politics. You don't need me to tell you that your food is getting more expensive, but the why is starting to get a bit funny if you can ignore all the poverty and cancer. I'll get to that in a second. Because after today's inflation figures showed that prices were still going up even though inflation was slightly coming down and food price inflation is going through the roof, Sky News' Ed Conway said this.
And when we talk about inflation and these numbers that we've just had through recently, really what economists are talking about is the difference between that level and that level. And when you look at that difference, that is indeed 3.4%, okay? So it does look like the cost of living crisis is abating when you focus specifically on that. But if you look back over a longer period, so look back over the last 4 years, for instance, and then you're talking about a 25% change in the cost of living. So that's the key thing here. That cost of living is still very real. The cost of living kind of squeeze that people are feeling, that you may indeed still be feeling, is very real indeed. And actually the difference, the 4-year difference there, 25% at the moment, if we look at the chart to say exactly, I've just been showing you exactly the same numbers.
Do you see how he's not mentioning Brexit at all during that, even though you see where that line starts to go up kind of rapidly at 2021? Yeah, we left the EU single market in January 2021. So while we left the EU officially in 2020, we didn't leave the economic systems of the single market and customs union until January 2021. And while obviously COVID in 2020 and the Ukraine war starting in 2022 had a significant effect on prices, and you can see in the chart how those affected things, it's also extremely clear that in 2021, that's when shit really hit the fan. But he's not mentioning that, even though literally every sector of our economy is saying Brexit is making things more expensive. Like food prices are said to be the main thing boosting inflation right now, and the London School of Economics said Brexit is responsible for about a third of food price inflation. Morrison's last month said that Brexit is making food prices higher, which is why they want Keir Starmer to change the deal with the EU. The Food and Drink Association has always been saying that Brexit is making things more expensive for them. And it's not just food. In April, Cancer Research UK said that Brexit is making it harder for the UK to get cancer drugs. Like, this isn't some political organization. This is Cancer Research UK saying we don't care about geographical barriers, we just want to make it easier to get the drugs we need to save lives. They say that 79% of the UK's cancer researchers say Brexit is making it harder for them to do their jobs. They also literally mention that Brexit is taking medicine away from cancer kids. Like, we've known for years based on the Nuffield Trust that Brexit has been damaging the NHS. And a study a couple of months ago showed that Brexit was costing 1,500 lives a year. And Monday, 16th of June, was the 9-year anniversary of Joe Cox, the Labour MP, being murdered in the street by a member of the far right 7 days before the EU referendum. And Brexit is the most significant policy in the UK of the last 40 years of UK politics. It has a literally bloody history and is directly relevant to what Ed Conway is discussing on Sky News, as is clear from the graph he's using, but he chooses not to mention it, which is funny because he actually quotes the Bank of England.
Obviously, the Bank of England is looking at all of this. They're looking at what's happening to prices over the last year, but they're looking at prices at a longer term basis, and that then informs whether they're going to bring interest rates down. And
that's right, the Bank of England decides what our interest rates are, so how easy it is to afford a mortgage, and they say that that's based on inflation. But the Bank of England also says that inflation is heavily impacted by Brexit. But the elephant in the room gets even more comical when he says this.
If we just look at them and look at the 4-year change rather than the 1-year change, the highest change that we've seen since 1992.
1992 is the year the EU single market was created. That's the year. So what he's just said means the UK has had its 2 worst 4-year periods for rising prices before we joined the single market and after we left the single market. That's what he's literally just said. So if I'm getting this correctly, the UK's prices were lower when it was in the same jurisdiction and therefore had no red tape with all of its main European supply chains. Shocking. Now look, I'm not claiming to be an expert in pre-1992 British economics, but with the picture he's painting, like, it makes it ridiculous that he's not mentioning the single market. So it is simply not possible for Ed Conway to have the brainpower to operate a slideshow, but not realize that Brexit is relevant to that slideshow. The longer this goes on, the more the people that refuse to acknowledge the elephant in the room just look stupid. Because the sooner we go back into the EU single market, the sooner we can properly address the cost of living crisis. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics if politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.